Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a neighbor is jealous of my inherited farmland and moves the fence on my property to claim it as his own. He insists that half of my land belongs to him. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. My father was the owner of a large farm outside of town, much beloved and a pillar of the community. Though not everyone felt that way, one man in particular was jealous of his success. X was a neighbor who also owned farmland, though nowhere near the size or quality of my father's estate. The two often bickered about the land rights, which I thought would cease at the time of my father's passing, but instead X took the opportunity to put his evil plans finally into motion. When my father passed away, it was sudden and unexpected. Though it was a small comfort to know that he died peacefully in his sleep, it still shook our family terribly. A week following the funeral, I was handed my inheritance, my father's farm and lands. While I felt in no reasonable state to carry on where he left off, I also wanted to do him proud, keep the farm going. It was my second day of moving boxes that I met X. He made no condolences, if anything, he looked excited to have a new neighbor. Our interaction was brief, he made no offer to help and I did not ask. X often passed my driveway on his walk with his two large sheepdogs. I was unlucky enough to catch him outside on one of those mornings. While conversation was difficult over the incessant barking of his noisy hounds, I did catch the occasional word. Fence came up a lot, as did right, followed by charades when it became more clear that I only heard half the conversation. X was basically trying to insist that the fence between us should be moved and that my father owed him some land due to a border error. I nodded along politely, but non-committedly. Later, I decided to call for an appointment with a surveyor over to confirm his theory. The land surveyor was as confused by the idea as I was and assured me that all property borders were currently correct. So I guess X turned out to be a complete liar. Surprise, surprise. X must have noticed my visitor as he came poking around after, very curious to who they were. When I told him it was a surveyor, he was furious to hear that I didn't take his word for it, no doubt because he knew he was lying through his crooked teeth. The conversation hit a standstill after that and he left in quite a sulk. I guess whatever goodwill we had between us was spent now, leaving only hostility from a distance. It was a while before I saw him again, and even on days he passed by I was in no rush to say hello. That was until I saw him strolling casually through my field on his usual dog walk. I guess I never asked or considered his route before, but I was really annoyed that X trod through my fields every day without so much as asking me first. While he simply could have mistaken it for a public footpath, I doubted his naivety. Wasting no time to correct his mistake, I set up some no trespassing and private land signs at the various entrances later that night. Maybe now he would at least come to me to ask permission first, I thought. I guess I should have known better though. The next morning I made a point of waiting by the window to see what he would do. Like clockwork, X came around the corner with his dogs. It was no surprise seeing as you can hear them barking long before you make sight of them. And well, he strolled straight past the first sign while he was looking at his phone. Putting away his phone, he did catch the second sign, stopping to read it. He scoffed loudly, turning towards my house with a bitter scowl. Luckily, I ducked out of sight in time to avoid his gaze. When I came back to look again, he was gone, but definitely carried on his usual path. Great, I thought, just another issue to deal with after my family vacation. As much as I did enjoy the annual tradition, it did come at a bad time this year, but I was still resolved to go anyway. It was only going to be for a week at least. How bad could things get in a week without me, right? Ha! Well, quite bad it turns out. It was a short trip, but my worries at home only seemed to make it drag on longer. I was excited to be finally on the way back to the farm. Turning up the narrow public roads, I saw deep tread marks common to tractors, guessing X had been still busy with the farm work lately. As I arrived at my driveway, I was horrified to find the fence between our properties had been dug up and moved quite some distance, effectively cutting my own land in half. I followed the fence and found it covered as far as I could see. Probably my whole farm had now been downsized thanks to this neighbor. There were also some obvious signs of demolition work and large vehicles throughout, no doubt arranged by X in my absence. As I crossed the fence towards his door, I spotted his own makeshift signs of no trespassing, much similar to my own. In fact, they were. The cheeky bugger had stolen those as well and used them against me. After a few minutes of persistence, X finally opened the door, looking quite oblivious to my wrath. With a calm smugness, he pointed out that we had already discussed moving the fence, but I didn't consent. And that he thought it would be a good surprise for me, sort of like a moving in present. Well, it was a surprise for sure, but not a good one. I pointedly reminded him that the land was surveyed correctly, but he dismissed that as a hoax. When I offered to ask the police their thoughts on the matter, he smiled nervously before temporarily retreating, perhaps to get the phone for himself. Instead, when he opened the door again, the first thing I saw was the barrel of a shotgun pointed square at me, his calm face now red with rage. He directed me off his porch and followed me step by step until I was off his driveway. X demanded that I let things be and that if I called the police on him, there would be trouble. Not that any of his words carried any subtlety at gunpoint. I nodded calmly, freezing up and hoping his trigger finger just did not slip. Suddenly, a noise from the house behind distracted his attention. It was only for a second, but it was enough. I lunged at him, forcing the barrel away from me as we wrestled for control of the firearm. With youth and build on my side, I overpowered the angry old farmer, knocking him to the floor with a jab from his own gun. He sat there stunned as I called the police, keeping the shotgun firmly gripped in my free hand. By the way, is it griped or gripped? I'm not sure. Anyway, we did not have long to wait, and after explaining the situation, we were both taken away for further questioning. I returned home several hours later, and as far as I knew, the matter was dealt with. It was not until much later on that I heard X was sentenced to several years behind bars for a sum of offenses, none of which I felt particularly sorry about. He brought it all on himself and I was glad to be rid of him. By the way, of course I also pressed charges against him since I don't let anyone bully me like that without consequences. Well, in his absence, it looked like his farm was sold to a housing developer. I was not overly thrilled with the idea of that, but thought at least my own land would be safe. In the months that followed, there was an uneasy peace throughout, and for now I enjoyed that while I could. As far as I knew, X would not be back for a while, and if he was, then his farm would not be waiting for him anymore. And here, Ripe Stars, I really hope that this awful neighbor will never bother OP again, and that OP can continue the legacy of his father. And I'm sure he will be a better farmer than the neighbor. Anyway, the next one is an Am I the Douchebag story. So Tim and I met in an English literature class of our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he would out-earn me by a considerable margin, though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he did not ask about the actual amount and I didn't want to be braggy about it, especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place, and in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead, he has started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am, that no English literature major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who did not have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister, but it was for non-profit work making $22,000 per year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity, equity and inclusion program. And I will admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also noted that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it, especially since I grew up blue collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new and first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead are not funny, or guy talk ribbing as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen, and we have not really talked since yesterday. Did I go too far? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. But honestly, personally for me, this is a super weird relationship. If my girlfriend would make more money than me, and to be honest at the moment she's on a good path because she actually has several YouTube channels and I only have one, I would be super happy and proud of her. But instead it looks like this person here is super insecure and really uncomfortable with his wife making more money than him. And funnily enough, I have seen the exact similar situation with a person in my family. And it really seems like something that a lot of guys are not comfortable with for some reason. And certainly that guy in the story is not a feminist if he acts like this. Anyway, let me know what you think about this. Comment number 1, not the a-hole. He is not much of a feminist if he thinks you got one of your jobs just because you're a woman. He is an insecure little boy like you said. Edit it out, or a scholarship, so people replying can stop thinking I didn't know she got the scholarship because she happened to be a woman, even though getting a scholarship like that requires skilled writing from a woman. Comment number 2, not the a-hole, but you all have some serious problems. I cannot imagine being with someone for 10 years and not telling them how much money I make. Even if you split your finances and have separate accounts, it's important to know how much money you're bringing in. It sounds to me like you guys have a real problem with communication that needs to be fixed if you intend to stay with him. I wouldn't, but that's just me. I cannot imagine my husband being jealous and accusatory if I made more than him. He would be happy for me and for us. And yeah guys, I feel the same. Shouldn't you be like on the same team and as I said be like proud of your partner if he or she makes more money than you? This shouldn't be a competition about who makes more money. This is just childish. Anyway, the next one is titled, Yes, I Will Leave Your Property. Several years ago, I worked as a tool guy. For those who don't know, mechanics buy all their own tools, shops provide very little. They are also incredibly busy people, so I would drive shop to shop with a big truck full of tools to sell, fix, order tools, and help find solutions to things they were coming across. Plenty of mechanics spent as much on tools as students spent on college. This was a difficult job as my customers were a very rough bunch, but you had to have thick skin to do this job and those that didn't would not last long at all. I was running one of the most established routes in the area to the point where mechanics from other territories would travel to me due to my knowledge, reliability and inventory. I was well known in the local automotive community and I pampered my customers. The issue with pampering your customers is that some of them grow used to it and don't realize how good they have it. Most everyone was a delinquent at some point in their life, but they would often mature enough to be tolerable as they get older. Not all of them though. One guy I saw had an unbelievable temper. He would regularly talk down to me, demand everything from me, zero tolerance, and would even complain about the free candy I would have on the truck for everyone. One day I showed up and he asked, "Hey, do you remember that time I told you my jump pack was acting up?" "I don't, sorry, what's wrong with it?" Well, F me sideways. He did not like the fact that I didn't remember a conversation from 4 months ago. He flipped out and he started complaining and going on a tirade. I don't remember what he said, but only half was in English, so you know that he was pissed. He ended up throwing a ratchet at me and yelled, "Just fix my stuff and then get the F out of my property." Finally, an out. I picked up his ratchet and rebuilt it, made a repair order for his jump pack, left everything nice and neat on his unbelievably messy toolbox and never stepped foot on his property again. My boss asked me why and I told him he never argued with me about it. I work 12 to 14-hour days, I was not gonna put up with that crap and he agreed with me. From then on, he had to go out of his way to get everything he needed, and it was likely a lot. He even moved his shop to a different area where a less reliable tool guy was. I heard a rumor that he wanted to apologize to me so I would come back, but he never had the stones to do it. And the next one was posted on r/ripe stories and it is titled, "Karen punches kid, cowers before the voice of God." Posted by user Fantastic Argument 99 on our subreddit. Once upon a time in the fabled land of New York City, when I was 10 or so years of age, my father and I stood at the counter of a small cafe in a Macy's. My father was placing the order coffee, I'm sure, black for him and a sweetened one for my mom. I was leaning with folded arms on the counter's edge with one foot bouncing by the toe on the floor behind me, a product of my Tourette syndrome. And it should be noted that the store was empty around us with no other people in line or even within a stone's throw of the cafe. Now, while I stood in calm idleness, amid the bright glow of skylights and lightly colored merchandise displays, several things happened. First, there was the feeling of someone tripping over my bouncing foot, followed by a surprised and angered, "Hey!" Finally, I felt a weak impact of clenched knuckles between my shoulder blades. Unhurt but startled, I turned and saw a woman, perhaps in her late 50s, thin almost to the point of frailty, glaring at me with an anger that quailed my goody two-shoes heart. I was an oddly well-behaved child growing up, beloved of my teachers, prone to putting myself into timeout for crimes unwitnessed, and woefully untoughened in the face of the dark things of life. And so, while today I can see in the eye of memory that this woman's anger had all the limp potency of an overcooked stalk of asparagus, at the time I was still afraid. The woman spoke frantic and shrill. "You cannot just do that. You cannot just stick your leg out like a shot." My father's arm was out and had caught her by the upper arm. All in a flash, her face lost all its anger, along with all the color bequeathed to it by the last vestiges of middle age. And then my father spoke. And he spoke with the voice that all good men know, and which they sometimes pick up like a sword when there's warring to do and wrongs to right, that slow, stern voice in which can be heard distant echoes of the fulgurous tones that assailed Moses atop the high crest of Disnii. "My son," he began, "has Tourette's." I remember nothing more of what he said, but even now I can hear the terrible, nearly song-like cadence of those first 4 words like the opening notes of a funeral dirge. He spoke for but a moment, but when he released the woman, she fled silently and swiftly away. The whole affair was perhaps 20 seconds, and though I cried in my mother's arms in the aftermath, I would not undo the experience now, even if I could. For those few painful seconds and years of reflection since have taught me 2 true things. That there are villains in the world, and yes, but there are heroes too.
The next one is titled, "Never Mess with a Veteran." I am a disabled veteran. This happened to me about 4 years ago. Quick info, the Veterans Administration will cover medical expenses at any hospital if a veteran has an emergency and cannot get a veterans hospital. There are VA hospitals and there are VA clinics. A clinic is very small and they barely put in stitches. So there is a VA clinic about 10 minutes from my house. The closest VA hospital is 2 hours away from me. On to the story, I wake up at 2:30 AM with a stabbing pain in my side and I am almost in tears. My wife gets me to the car and we head to the nearest local hospital emergency room. While I am being assessed by the doctor, my wife is answering questions and filling out paperwork. They ask if I have any health insurance and she tells them that I'm a veteran. The front desk lady says that she will send the bill to the VA. She obviously knows how this works when veterans come in. Fast forward about 4 months. I received a phone call from a collection agency. I told them that this was some kind of mistake and as you would expect, they did not believe me. I contacted the local hospital and they told me that the VA had denied to pay for my emergency room visit. After the denial from the VA, the hospital sent the bill to the wrong address and I never received any bills. That's why I was sent to collections. I called the VA department that handles payments from outside the VA facilities. I asked the man why my ER visit was not paid for and he told me that I had access to a VA facility 10 minutes from my house. There was no need to go to a regular hospital. I told him that the one 10 minutes away is a clinic and it was 2:30 in the morning. They are obviously closed. He still kept insisting that I should have went there first. Nothing I could have said could make this guy understand that they were closed and if they were open, they were not equipped to handle emergencies. Finally, he told me that I had to pay for my visit. Revenge is mine. I sat around trying to figure out what to do. But then it hit me. I actually googled how to contact the White House. There are 3 ways. Number 1, you can send an email and number 2, you can write a letter. Also, you can just pick up the phone and call. I choose option 3. I called and someone picked up on the first ring. I explained everything to her and she said, "Would you like for me to connect you to the White House Veterans Complaint Department?" Why yes I would. After explaining everything to the nice lady at the complaint department, she said that her director would want to hear this. After explaining everything again, she was quite upset with this billing department guy who refused my claim. She gave me her direct extension and said that she would take care of it. The next morning I received a call from the billing idiot with no common sense. He immediately apologized to me and told me not to worry about my bill. Everything would be taken care of. He gave me his direct extension and said for me to call him if I get any bills or calls from the collection agency. I guess sometimes you have to skip the middleman and go straight to the top. I would have given anything to be in his office when he received that phone call, and yes, this is 100% a true story. And in case anyone was wondering, it was kidney stone.
And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.